All right, let's jump right in. Welcome back to this explainer, where we decode the ancient Sanskrit texts to really understand the profound architecture of human existence. Today, we're exploring an absolutely fascinating duality found in Vedic astrology. We're going to look at how two specific planetary rulers dictate our most intense, grueling struggles and our highest, most incredible blessings. We're analyzing what the ancient sages called Ashtamesh, which is the lord of the 8th house, and Navamesh, the lord of the 9th house. I want you to think of them as the absolute pit of death and obstacles versus the absolute peak of human destiny and fortune.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll quickly cover the Vedic astrological chart, followed by the rulers of the houses. Then we dive into Ashtamesh, the lord of obstacles, and Navamesh, the lord of fortune. Next, we'll see what happens when fortune meets hardship, and finally, we'll wrap up with the balance of karma. Let's get to it.
Before we get to the specific planetary lords, we really have to understand the grand stage they operate upon. Think of the zodiac not just as some random scattering of stars, but as an incredibly precise cosmic clockwork. This clockwork literally times the unfolding of your life's events. The ancient sage Rishi Parasara taught that we are actually born from these planetary energies to play out our specific karmas. The zodiac? Well, it's the divine mathematical map of that exact karma.
Section 1. The Vedic astrological chart. Let's establish the physical layout of these cosmic forces.
Now notice the geometric precision of the traditional diamond chart. This divides life into 12 distinct territories, which are known in Sanskrit as bhavas. Each bhava governs a completely different aspect of your human experience. We're talking everything from your physical body in the first house, to your wealth, your siblings, your mother, your children, all the way around to your final liberation in the 12th house. It is a complete 360-degree view of your destiny, captured perfectly at the exact moment of your birth.
Section 2. Rulers of the houses. Because understanding the houses is really just the first step. To unlock the real predictive power of this science, we have to look at the rulers. If the houses are the territories of a kingdom, well then the planets are the governors who rule them. In astrological terms, every bhava or house has a ruling planet, known as its lord. The entire dynamic of your life changes drastically depending on which lord moves into which bhava. It's kind of like a cosmic game of musical chairs. When the governor of your wealth moves into the house of loss, you're going to experience financial struggle. But when the governor of your career moves into the house of gains, you experience profound success. Make sense?
So here we see the crux of our study today. The stark, almost jarring contrast between the treacherous 8th house and the immensely auspicious 9th house. The 8th house, known as Rundra, governs longevity, sure, but also battles, enemies, deep sudden crises, and the wealth of the dead, like inheritances. It is a dark, mystical, and profoundly challenging domain. And then, right next door, literally adjacent to it, is the 9th house, the house of Dharma. This is the domain of highest fortunes, righteousness, divine grace, and spiritual pursuits. The contrast couldn't be sharper.
Section 3. Ashtamesh, the lord of obstacles.
With that foundation set, we began our descent into the pit with the 8th lord, known as Ashtamesh or Randresha. Let's look at the precise verses from Maharishi Parasara to understand what happens when the lord of obstacles travels through your chart. When Ashtamesh occupies the early houses of your chart, it brings sudden, harsh realities. Looking at verse 85, placement in the first house manifests as physical wounds and hostility to divine matters. It attacks the self. Move this lord to the second house of wealth, as described in verse 86, and it aggressively drains both bodily vigor and finances. In the third house, verse 87 warns of indolence and a lack of fraternal happiness. And tragically, verse 88 states that in the fourth house, the native may be deprived of their mother, lands, and happiness very early on. The takeaway here? The 8th lord brings sudden destructive energy into whichever area of life it touches.
Continuing our research, verse 89 presents a really fascinating paradox for the 5th house. The native's intelligence may be clouded. The text calls it dull-witted, yet they can actually be long-lived, with violently fluctuating wealth. Now, contrast this with verse 92. If the 8th lord remains mathematically strong in its own 8th house, it actually grants a very long life. It's comfortable in its own chaos. However, if it is weak there, the native may resort to theft. But beware the 12th house of loss. Verse 96 warns that placement here causes resources to be spent on evil deeds, incurring a drastically short lifespan. The 8th lord ultimately is a heavy, karmic debt that absolutely must be paid.
So, the crucial point is that the eighth lord represents the intense friction necessary for our soul's growth, often manifesting as painful obstacles. But what happens when the planet of ultimate fortune takes the wheel? Fortunately, Vedic astrology isn't all just battles and loss. There's also immense, beautiful grace.
Section 4, Navamesh, the Lord of Fortune.
We now ascend to the peak to meet the ninth lord, also known as Bhagyesha, the absolute beacon of your highest destiny. This is the planet that carries the accumulated good karma from your past lives. Let's look at verse 105 from the classic texts. If the ninth lord is in the ninth, the native will be endowed with abundant fortunes, virtues, and beauty. When the Lord of Fortune sits firmly in its own house, it yields effortless success. The texts elaborate that this placement grants deep fraternal bliss, magnificent fortune, and easy success in virtually every undertaking. This is the hallmark of a soul that has arrived in this life with an immense spiritual bank account.
As this table illustrates, wherever the Lord of Fortune goes, it acts like a golden touch, elevating the native's status, wealth, and intellect to absolute royal heights. In verse 97, if Navamesh is in the first house, the native is highly fortunate, learned, and what the texts call honored by the king, recognized by the state. Verse 98 shows that in the second house of wealth, the native becomes a beloved scholar who is naturally wealthy and sensuous. And look at verse 106. If the ninth lord moves into the 10th house of career, the individual achieves the absolute highest echelons of power, becoming a king, a minister, or a commander. It elevates everything it influences.
Section 5. When fortune meets hardship.
Human life is rarely just pure suffering or pure royalty, right? These cosmic forces don't exist in a vacuum, and sometimes the pathways of fortune and hardship cross. Let's see how this tension builds when the Lord of Fortune stumbles into challenging territories. Verse 102 states that if the beautiful ninth lord is placed in the sixth house, which is the house of enemies and disease, the native's prosperity becomes meager and they're constantly troubled by opposition. Even more dramatically, verse 104 reveals that if your ruling Lord of Fortune falls into the eighth house, that very pit of obstacles we discussed earlier, your luck simply dries up. The text explicitly says the native becomes devoid of fortunes and fails in undertakings. It's a powerful, sobering reminder that even the strongest positive karma can be suppressed if it gets trapped in the darkest areas of the cosmic map.
Which brings us to Section 6, the balance of karma. This is really the profound philosophical core of this entire system.
Ultimately, Vedic astrology views both the extreme hardships of the eighth lord, the Ashtamesh, and the royal blessings of the ninth lord, the Navamesh, as a unified, purposeful system. Both the pit and the peak are necessary, highly interconnected expressions of your personal karma. The purpose of charting these extreme highs and catastrophic lows isn't to induce anxiety or fear, not at all. Rather, it's a profound diagnostic tool. It allows you to understand the exact curriculum your soul literally signed up for in this lifetime. The obstacles build resilience and clear out old karmic debts, while the fortunes provide the resources you need to fulfill your earthly dharma.
To truly grasp this, we have to return to the foundational philosophy outlined back in Chapter 2 of the text. It states, the Jivatma portions from the Grahas take births as human beings and live their lives according to their karmas, and again merge in the Grahas. The Jivatma portions, meaning the individual soul portions, from the Grahas take births. The Grahas are the planets. We are literally made from these planetary energies, both the challenging 8th house energies and the blessed 9th house energies. We are born from them to play out our specific karmic script, and once the script is completed, to these cosmic energies we will ultimately return.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the profound duality of Chapter 23, the 8th and 9th lords, we've seen how they map our lowest lows and highest highs. As we prepare to explore subsequent chapters and the deeper mysteries of the remaining planetary rulers, I leave you with this thought. By understanding the intricate dance of the pit and the peak, we stop being victims of circumstance and start becoming conscious participants in our own destiny. So ask yourself, how might these cosmic forces, both the painful obstacles and the immense fortunes, be actively shaping your own soul's journey today? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep seeking the knowledge that illuminates your path.